Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Ed-to-Ed webinar, Enhancing Small Group Instruction. My name is Beth Hinton. I'm an Efficacy and Implementation Manager here at Smart Technologies, and I'm very excited to present to you today Laura Van Helmont, and she is a Training Specialist Lead here with Smart Technologies as well. So before we get started, I wanted just to cover a few housekeeping items. So we've taken a screenshot of an example of the panel you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. We have the audience in listen-only mode today, as there are quite a few of us on the call. So if you do have questions, please submit them through the question pane on your panel. We will definitely do our best to get questions answered throughout the webinar if they're about the content that's being shared. And if it's a technical question, we also will do our best to answer individually. We will also be sharing a few things through the pane on the right-hand side throughout this webinar, such as the website you can go to next week for the recording of the webinar, as well as getting a copy of the materials that are being presented today so you can apply what you've covered in your classroom. Just a quick note, all of these webinar materials within that week will also be sent to you since you have registered for this afternoon webinar. And to minimize the pane, there's a red arrow that you can just click on. We offer certificates for you to document your PD hours. Simply by logging into training.smarttech.com after the webinar, forward through both of the webinars and mark complete. You will then be able to download your certificate. If you have questions about how to do this or are interested in other training and professional development opportunities, click on the navigation video at the bottom at training.smarttech.com. Without further ado, I'm very pleased to go ahead and turn it over to our presenter now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Like Beth had said earlier, my name is Laura Van Helmont, and I'm a Training Specialist Lead for Smart Technologies out of Florida. For my background, I have been in education for over 15 years, mostly with private schools and charter schools. And for those of you who don't know, charter schools are publicly funded schools in the United States that are privately run. And I also have some experience in the nonprofit sector in education. My actual background is in computer science, STEM, and technology. My degree is actually in computer science, so I'm a little bit of a computer science programming coding nerd, and I definitely am involved in all types of ed tech. As you can see, I've provided my information for you if you have any follow-up questions after the webinar. I'm also very active on Twitter, so if you'd like to follow me, I'll follow you back. My handle is @TechSavvyLaura, and we'd also love for you to follow along at Smart's handle as well, and the Smart PLN Champion Teacher Group. For this webinar today, we're actually using Smart Learning Suite Online. So if you are able to, I would love for you to actually open up an additional tab within your web browser in addition to this webinar, and go to this website, hellosmart.com. And when you get there, I want you to join as a guest, and you're going to enter a code. That class code is 914351. If you don't have access to it right now, I will have a couple reminders throughout the presentation today for you to be able to join and actively participate in this presentation today. So again, it's hellosmart.com and a new tab in your browser, 914351. So today's webinar is going to be covering about small group instruction. So the purpose is for us to enhance what we're already doing with small group instruction. And throughout this webinar, I'm also going to be covering some very interactive strategies and features that you can use within Smart Learning Suite Online to engage your small group instruction. And the last thing is, I'm hoping by the end of this webinar that you have some new and creative and innovative ideas that you can enhance your small group instruction with, especially as we're coming down to kind of the closing of the school year. Again, if you haven't had an opportunity to join, I want you to make sure that you go over to hellosmart.com and an additional tab, 914351 as my code, and you're entering as a guest. Going to give just another minute or so for a couple more people to get in. All right. So after this screen, you're going to be given an activity, and that activity is going to be based off of this question that's presented in front of you now. When would you use the following types of instruction? Small group instruction, whole group instruction, so your entire class, collaborative groups where maybe your students are working on project-based learning, or they're really just interacting with each other on an assignment, or independent learning, that time when students really need that one-on-one time. So again, when would you use the following types of instructions? So if you're in the Hello Smart tab, you're going to have an opportunity to be able to enter a response to this activity. This is called Shout It Out. And I've categorized on my screen, what I see is 4 categories: the small group, whole group, and collaborative group, and whole group instruction. And on your side, you're going to have an area where you can actually write a text box in, select and drop down arrow to be able to choose which category you want to have it in. We've got some responses coming in. I love this. So for small group, which is what we're going to be focusing on today mostly, you can see a lot of people are using it for intervention when they're trying to reteach something. Maybe they're practicing something you just learned out of a whole group activity. And then in that whole group activity, we talked about an exit ticket, introducing new topics, new concepts. Ooh, I love in small group, you have remediation, enrichment, collaborative, math homework, brainstorming, science labs. A great thing about Shout It Out is it really gives students an opportunity to be able to have voice and choice as when they're entering in the content. If a student does accidentally maybe put something in the wrong category, you are able to, as the teacher, move it over into a different category. Or let's say there's a response that we don't want, then you can actually go ahead and you can take it over to the trash can and you can delete that object. This is great. This really helps me to guide this presentation and really kind of focus on that small group instruction. I love it, guys. As I move on from my slide, you'll notice that the activity also moves on from your side. So one of the things that I learned in researching this topic for the webinar today is that a lot of different people, depending upon where they are in the world, or even just in different districts in the same exact state or country, have different definitions of what small group instruction would look like. So what I wanted to do was actually lay the groundwork for everybody to have a common definition of what small group instruction is going to look like for this webinar. So when I think of small group, I'm thinking of groups of around 2 to 6 students that are working with a teacher, while the remainder of the class is actually working on some sort of other learning activity. Usually I think of it as some sort of center rotation or station rotation in a blended learning model. And so small group is just one element of what students will actually rotate through to make sure that they're getting the curriculum that they need. And that small group does provide for that target instruction, so potentially that remediation, that deepening, or that extra exercise on the content of what they're actually learning about. It doesn't always have to be teacher-led, though. A lot of times I know I envision seeing a teacher at a kidney table and they're teaching the little kindergarten students about reading, but that doesn't always have to be the case, especially as the older the students get. that they can have more agency and ownership over that small group learning, and to be able to actually even lead their own groups with the teacher as maybe the guide on the side rather than the leader or the facilitator. There is a wealth of amount of research available about the benefits of small group instruction. And a lot of times when we think of small group instruction, my mind always just goes straight to reading. So this Fountas and Pinnell quote was so important to me about how it really helps students to like zero in on what their deficiencies are, and then to be able to kind of collaborate together in that group in order to move their learning goals forward. However, it's also really important in other subject areas. And one of those I wanted to talk about was math. And the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, I'm going to open up this link here. You can actually, on your screen, if you're still in Hello Smart, you can click on the math logo that's there, the NCTM logo, and it will take you over to the same summary I'm currently looking at in the webinar. If you scroll down to the third page, you'll see the mathematics teaching practices. And what I love is that these 8 practices totally align with what you can achieve in a small group setting. So what I love about this is that I'm going to go down to like the 5th option, pose purposeful questions. In a small group, you can have that communication where students are able to effectively ask questions and get answers in a collaborative model. You can also have, you can build more fluency, you can elicit that student thinking, you really know what's going on in their head, and then you're able to actually see where maybe they're making misconceptions or mistakes, and you're able to guide them very quickly back over. So I just loved how much these 8 teaching practices really tied in with some of the goals of what you can achieve in small group learning. And then if you click on the Visible Learning Plus, that's also a link, and it will take you out to another study. This is actually from the Hattie Metacognitive Meta-Analysis research. And if you scroll onto the second page, what Hattie did is they actually combined all the different other types of research that were going on, and they determined what are the 250 things that influence student achievement and at to what level. And you'll notice on the left-hand side under classroom, small group learning has a high to moderate high impact upon student learning. So really encouraging teachers of all levels, K-12, to be able to actually pull small groups, not just for elementary, that it has a big impact upon student achievement. So I know I've kind of covered a couple of misconceptions already. So just to recap a few of those, a lot of times we think it's for elementary or primary school students that you're going to envision them sitting at that kidney table with the elementary teacher guiding them through, and this homogeneous group of the redbirds and the bluebirds back from when I was a kid. And that, you know, it's predominantly for reading groups and being able to do leveled reader options. And that, you know, those low level learners that really need that boost are the ones that you focus on the most. Now, I'm not saying that these aren't good strategies or good things to include in your small groups, but this shouldn't be the only thing that's happening in your small group or the only groups that you're targeting. It's definitely for all types of learners, because you don't just need to do remediation in small group, you can also do extension. It's not just for reading, it could be science, math, social studies, or even it could be for any sort of electives. I know when I taught technology that I also included small groups in my course as well. And it's definitely not just for elementary. Small groups can definitely be pulled for all grade levels and center rotations or station rotations. And there's definitely some options to be able to pick different types of grouping methods rather than homogeneous groups. So the next activity that I have, if you hit start on your screen, you'll be able to follow along if you're in Hello Smart. And if you're still in the webinar portion, then you'll be able to see as I'm clicking through as well. And so these are some of the benefits of small group instruction. One of them is immediate feedback. So since you have that small group, you're able to provide that quicker feedback to students that is more directed and targeted as to the group that you're working with. You're also able to infuse student interest. So if you're pulling a small group, maybe that's all interested in cars, your math lesson could focus about cars. If they're all focused and interested in something that's happening in the world today, you can infuse that interest as well. The final outcome is always that you can increase learning outcomes because you have that more targeted instruction. In small groups, students are also more inclined to take risks, and it helps to build confidence. And you have that increased student discourse, so students talking to other students, students talking to the teacher talking to the students. And so you have that more intimate environment where you're having increased conversations and can clear up a lot of misconceptions or build upon their already known prior knowledge. It's definitely a great opportunity for pre-teaching and reteaching. So maybe before you're doing your whole group instruction, you're giving them a little kind of taste as what they're about to learn. Or maybe there's an opportunity where you saw those kids that just like had that little look on their face that they're like, I didn't get that lesson today. And you're able to actually reach out and really get to help and support their growth. And then the last one, I know this is a real big buzzword right now, is you're able to really personalize instruction and target that differentiated support and to provide what the students need. I know it's so hard when you have 25 or 30 students in a classroom at a time to be able to provide that really personalized learning. And by creating station rotations or centers with small groups, you are able to provide that opportunity for the students. This activity is called a label reveal. So I love this activity to be able to have students be able to click on the different portions of an image, and you're able to hide the labels or show the labels. It's just a really interactive approach to be able to go through some sort of diagramming process with students. So overall, how can the SMART solution help support an engaging, innovative, and hands-on approach for small group instruction? And then that caveat, with limited access to technology. So the rest of the examples that I'm going to go through today are going to have the idea that your students don't have access to a one-to-one environment. It's amazing if you do, but if you don't, I'm going to give you some strategies along the way that you can utilize in order to do your small group instruction. So this would look like shared devices, maybe 2 to 3 students paired up on one device. Maybe this is going to be a BYOD situation, so bring your own device where students are going to have different types of devices. Maybe you have some on a cell phone, some on a tablet, some on a computer. Or potentially even, maybe it's just your smart panel in the classroom and you're going to be utilizing that with Smart Learning Suite Online. So keep those options in mind as we go through some of the different examples I'm going to show you this afternoon. So the first portion is about grouping students. So we talked earlier about how homogeneous grouping isn't always the best option. However, it's definitely great for a lot of things: skills practice, remediation, extension, when students are all at the same level. You can also have heterogeneous groups, so they're going to be mixed abilities. Those would be great if you're going to have student discussion and maybe doing some project-based learning within your small group. You could also have student selected options for groups where that allows students to have some agency and ownership over their learning. And then they have some awareness about what their needs are. And so they can then select which people they think would be best to work with their small group. And then you can also have interest-based. So whatever the topic of the content is, if they're all focused on one thing that they really like, that could help to increase engagement. So I love this little graphic by Mr. Hildebrandt. And I love how it takes you through, like, should you do this grouping? Yes or no? Should you do this grouping? Yes or no? And it really is a good idea to kind of think through that process as you're starting to form your student groups. One of the things that I loved to do in SMART for centers was actually create a centers chart. And I have a primary example here, and I'm going to have a secondary example in a moment. And in my primary example, this could be teacher-based or this could be student-based as to the selections of the rotations. And what the student or the teacher would do is they can actually take the image, click, and drag it over into the day, into their name as to what rotation they would be going through. Now let's say, for example, Jacob needs small group twice a week. He's going to go on Tuesday and Thursday. you can see as I'm pulling the image over, the original image is still staying there. That's something I created in Smart Notebook called an infinite cloner. So this could be set up on Monday for when your students come in, that the teacher is going to create it, or it could be something that is student created that they could actually go up to the panel within SLSO and then drag over the images as to what stations they know they need to get through in the week in order to accomplish their goals. On this next page, I have an example of a secondary rotation chart. So it takes away a little of the cuteness, however, it provides some explicit instructions for the students. So they have it clearly defined the 4 different rotations that they're going to be going in with the group activity, the free exploration, the independent practice, and the guided practice. So the guided practice is actually going to be the center that is going to be, I would say, teacher driven or teacher supported, where they're actually going to be going over review or extension about properties of shapes. What's great about this one is that you can actually click on the student's name and you can actually move them as they need to go through their rotations. So it could be something that after, 30 minutes of the period, they're done with an independent practice, they can go up to the board and they can actually move their name over to, hey, now they're ready for a group activity. Or they finished their group free exploration and now they're ready to go over and do their independent practice. Everything else on the page is locked down, except secondary rotation chart. So the students can't move the items except for their names. And so the students could have that, again, agency and ownership of their learning to be able to go through the different rotations that they need to complete. All right, now we're going into another student activity. I see a lot of you are still in my Smart Learning Suite online class, which is great. If you haven't had an opportunity to join, I encourage you to open up another tab, go to hellosmart.com and enter code 914351 and join as a guest. I apologize, join as a guest and click that code. This set of activities is going to be very interactive on your end, where you're going to want to join the class in order to be able to participate. What I'm going to be doing is setting up some activities for you based upon a primary or elementary language arts activity that has a science focus to it. So I'm going to walk you through this as if you were a student to hopefully give you some ideas for your classroom. Again, this would be ideal for a group of 4 to 6 students on shared devices or a BYOD situation for teacher-led small groups working with elementary age students. All right, so here's our example of our lesson. So the first question I have for you, and again, you guys are participating as students, is what facts do you know about plants and trees? And so this is the activity to help build that prior knowledge for students before they get into the activity that they're going to do. So I'm going to do another shout it out. If you're in Hello Smart, you'll have an opportunity to be able to enter response. What do you know already about plants and trees? Remember, you're participating as a student, plants and trees. They both have leaves, yeah. They both need for sunshine. They have leaves and roots, leaves and roots. They both produce oxygen. Trees have branches. They have roots, sunlight. Oh, I'm getting some great answers. Oh, photosynthesis. They both need water. Are there any things that you can think of that they have that are differences rather than similarities? Ooh, I like that autotrophs. We got some science people in here. They cannot move around. Their trees and plants are tall. They have roots and oxygen. So you can see how I'm getting a lot of responses in here. I can try and organize the responses by the differences and the similarities, almost like a Venn diagram. I could have created categories for you if I wanted even more specific responses. But I love it. Ooh, strawberry. Strawberry is a plant, you're right. All right, so this really helps students to think about what we're about to learn about. I'm gonna move on. All right, so the next activity, now that the students have built their prior knowledge and they've shared it out, they're actually gonna go into a closed reading activity. And this helps, this is gonna utilize the tools on the left-hand side in a minute. I'm gonna demonstrate for you first. So you're gonna read the directions in the blue box, and you're gonna be given a handout to actually complete this in a minute. To provide you an example, you have your pen tools over on the side, or you will in a minute, and you'll have access to highlighters as well as a couple additional tools as well, a text box and a image box where you can actually add images. What I would like you to do in your handouts is actually utilize the various tools that you're provided to be able to mark up your page. So for this one, you're trying to find inferences in here. So I'm going to start with the first paragraph. So the author says that they've always loved plants and they like to look at plants. They like to make up names for them. They draw pictures. And so my inference here is that this author, this is hard for me to do with mouse, guys, so hold on, likes plants. It's a lot easier on the panel with it than with the mouse. Okay. So I'm about to break you out where you're going to have your own independent handout in a second, and you're going to be able to mark up your image, you're going to be able to add text and annotate, making those inferences on your page.
Hi, Laura. We had a really great question that came into our chat. I was hoping since we were setting up this activity, maybe we could address. And the question is, how is accessibility achieved for various disabilities, i.e. like visual difficulties?
Well, the great thing about Smart Learning Suite Online is that you have two different options. So the student can actually be utilizing it on their device, and it is tablet and touch friendly. So students would be able to zoom in on any of the images and content that they would see in front of them. Also, it has ability for SLSO can be utilized on your panel in your classroom or on your smartboard in your classroom, and they'd be able to have actually ability to have touch on the screen as well. So I think there's a lot of ability to be able to make this friendly for all types of learners. All right, so if you're on Hello Smart, you're seeing your handout. If you're actually on my webinar, you're actually seeing everybody else's name. This is a new feature that was just released, where I can now actually go into each individual student's handout digitally and actually check on their work. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on one of our students here. I'm going to click on Akia. And Akia's just added a plant to hers with the image tool. I can zoom back out of hers. Let's see, I'm going to go into Hillary. Let's see. Maybe we'll check out Asha here. Asha's got some highlighting going on. Good job, Asha. So I can go in and see the progress of the students and provide some support. Let's see, CT. Ooh, learn some new things on plants. He's got some text, he's got some highlighting, and the idea is for you guys to be able to play around with some of the new features within handouts. If I needed to, if you're on the webinar side of this activity right now, I can also click, there's a button that says Teacher Handout on my end. And what I can do is actually bring out a copy of the handout, and I can start marking it up for my students to see on my smartboard. So if they need more scaffolding, a more direct instruction, they're missing something. So let's say this last paragraph I know covers parts about weeds and how weeds aren't really bad. That's going to be important in our next slide. That's why I'm mentioning it. And how, the difference between, what's the difference between deciduous and coniferous? And, they only mention the word deciduous in here. Maybe I draw a little question mark. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's a vocabulary word I need to learn. So like I said, if you're on the webinar side, you'll see me guiding through the teacher version of the activity and my ability to see into everybody else's handout as well. On your end as a student, you would just see your individual independent handout. Awesome. Going on to the next slide. This actually, each of these items on this page are linked out to different resources, and they're based off of the article that you just, or the passage that you guys just read. And so some of the things that I came up when I first read it, and I was like, well, what is the difference between a plant and a tree? All trees are plants, but not all plants are trees. So what's the difference? And then the next one is, well, it mentioned one type of tree, but it did not talk about both. So what is the difference between coniferous and deciduous? And why the heck do we even care about weeds? It came in that last paragraph. So like I said, if you click on the images or the text about weeds, you'll actually be directed out to individual websites where students can learn more about plants and trees. I am going to give you a second to click out because it is going to hinge on the next activity. One thing I would be able to do in small groups if I needed to allow my students to have a little bit more time and pacing, if I click on the button over here with your little faces here, I can actually turn you into student pacing, where you would then be able to have access to move freely throughout the lesson. As well, I'd be able to add on the fly handout activities and additional collaborative workspace activities. But we're not going to do that today for essence of time. All right, so here's our first workspace. So handouts, as we saw, was a very independent activity. Each student has their own. Workspaces, on the other hand, is a collaborative group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split you guys up into, we'll do 9 different teams. And you see I got a little pop-up at the bottom. Because you guys are logged in as guests today, your work will not be saved. If your students had access to a login through school, they'd actually be able to save their work and be able to complete activities over multiple sessions. So I've got you all divided into teams, and if you're on the webinar side, you see the 9 separate teams, about 4 people per team. And if I knew that certain people shouldn't be together, or I wanted to maybe switch up to groups a little bit, I can actually click and drag on the different participants' names or student names and change up their activities. So this, again, is a hands-on activity where everybody hopefully can join into their workspace. And what you will see on your screen now is an activity. On the teacher screen, I see everybody else's workspace, and I can click into the independent different screens and groups. So I'm currently in team 1, and the question is, from the passage and resources, share what you learned about plants and trees. The great thing about this is students are able to respond in a variety of different ways. They can respond through image, through text, and through writing. So if they had some sort of tablet device that had a touch screen, they would be able to write with their finger using the pencil tool. I got one, trees or plants. I'm in team 1. Let me go check in on some other teams as they're working here. All right, weeds aren't bad, good one. See, I'm going to pop into team 4 real quick. I've got a picture of a Christmas tree. So you notice you can insert the images, you can move them around on the page. Let's see here. And then team 8, oh, I love this. Plants are green, plants are coniferous, trees are plants. Really good job, team 8. You got pictures and text going on there. I love it. All right, I'm going to check in on one more team, see how their workspace is coming about. Got got some text, got some images. Plants do not live that long. Trees can live for hundreds of years. I love that. It's a great addition. And some images going on. It looks like you all are really getting the handle of workspaces. So you can see how in a small group, you could actually form them all into one team and have them work collaboratively within one team. You could also set up workspaces where you could have them work in smaller groups. So like maybe 2 students in each team. So maybe you have three teams running, and you're able to actually provide feedback to the students because you're able to kind of drill into each of their workspaces. So this would work really well with small groups. I know you guys are probably all excited and having fun in your workspace, but I am going to go ahead and move on. On your screen, you now see your assessment. So the students have completed the mini lesson as a small group, and now you're ready to kind of do a check for understanding and see where they're at. On your screen, you can go ahead and hit start at any time to complete this activity on your own, and I can also hit start so that it can be done as maybe just a small group with just myself and those 4 or 6 students. So on my end, I'm going to go ahead and hit start, and you'll see that there's some fun little music that goes along with this. You'd essentially have 2 different teams, so you'd want to have at least 2 students participating per device. You spin the wheel, and you'll end up getting a question, and it's going to be based upon that activity that we just did. Let's see. Yay, I got it correct. And then now the turn would go over to the other team. And then they would go ahead and spin the wheel. So it's kind of a fun way to do an assessment. On your end, you can also play around with it and see maybe what happens when you get an answer wrong. Ooh, I got a multiplier. Next time I spin, it's going to be worth 2 times as many points if I get it right. Now 4 times as many points. Now I get 800 points. Yay! So again, great for small groups. It works really well on a device with 2 students being able to play from that one device. All right, so that was a primary example of student grouping, and now I'm going to go into a secondary example of an activity for small groups. Now this is a little bit different because my idea is that this would be a non-teacher-led small group. This would be more like a station rotation. So maybe instead of it being that teacher-directed small group, it could be a small group that is interacting with technology. And so you're going to have that small quantity of students on those shared devices again, or a BYOD. It could potentially even be something that students were working on independently. And so the secondary activity is going to be a math activity, and it's about solving 2-step equations. So I hope all of you are still kind of in my class here, because you're going to have some activities you're going to be interacting with again. The first activity I would have for a small group that's kind of interacting on their own without teacher intervention is going to be a video, and that video is going to help to introduce the equations. And that's something that they would do later. I'm not going to show you today because it'll go too slow on the webinar. However, you'll have it in the follow-up resources. The next activity you can actually start on your own. I'm actually going to pop this out. I see a couple of people kind of maybe got booted out of the class. So if you're joining late or want to join, you're going to go to hellosmart.com, join as a guest, and my code 914351. If you're already in, you would have already been able to start the label and reveal activity. I'm going to go ahead and start on my end as well. And I really love this activity because label reveal, a lot of times I think of like amazing ways to use it in social studies, amazing ways to be able to use it in the science. But how the heck do you use label reveal in math? And so what I do is I pulled in the vocabulary that they're going to have to learn for this chapter. So what is a coefficient, what is a variable, and what are constants? And one of the things I did differently in this label reveal is if you click the plus signs, you actually have the definitions. And so this is something that students can go back and forth as they're trying to remember their vocabulary. Hey, what's that first number again? That's the coefficient. What's the definition? A number used to multiply a variable. Okay, then they can click off of it and click on again, and it brings it back to the question mark. What was it again? Oh, it's a coefficient. So then they can keep practicing their vocabulary throughout the lesson. The next activity is in another handout. I 369. I see some of you guys kind of popping in here now. So excited for this new update in handouts that was just released. On your end, you'll see the handout. My end, I see each individual student, and I can drill into each of the handouts. On my end, a little green check mark appears when you are done with your handout. I have 25 students who have started their handout. Oh, 26 of 36 participants. That's awesome. If I needed to show the handout on the smartboard, I can show that there. And I can drill into a student's work. I can rotate through. I've got somebody solving my two-step equations. Great job, Stephanie. The goal is this: remember that the students are working independently in the small group so they can be paired up as they're solving the problems. Then that quick math image is actually a link out, and that actually links out for them to be able to solve the problem, to check their work. So they would go through, solve the two problems, click on the link. They would go out, type their expression in, simplify it, see their answer, and check their work on their own without having to have any sort of teacher intervention. Thank you, Stephanie, for being my example on solving two-step equations. I've got a number of students who have completed and handed in their activity. All right, next one, moving on. So in this one, I'm going to model for you today, but the students would hopefully have already had an exposure to this activity. It also uses the infinite cloner that I used a little bit earlier today. And so I am going to actually build a model of the equation. So I have my 2x's, and I'm going to have my 3. Then I have my equal sign, and it's going to equal to let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I can utilize my tools and start solving it. So I'm going to take away 3. So now I've got 2x is equal to 4. Divide by 2 on both sides. So x equals 2. And then I can actually use my eraser, and I can erase my answer here. X equals 2. Great. On the next page, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. You're going to drag out, and you're going to be able to utilize the tools to solve your equation. I'm going to set up your workspaces for you. We'll do 7 teams this time. It's dividing you out into your teams. And I'm going to go ahead and start your workspaces. In your workspace, you'll work collaboratively together to be able to solve the problem using the modeling tools. So I'm going to go into team 7 here. and we'll be able to see if they're able to do their work. Somebody's erasing the answer first. Nope, I see some X's. I know there is a little bit of lag time on this activity through the webinar that you wouldn't be experiencing in your classroom. Oh, we've got some -3s. Good job. Got some negatives. All right, I'm going to go over to team 3. Some of you may have noticed that you weren't able to join in this activity if I did hit start before you were able to join on. That's why you would not be able to access the activity. This is definitely very user-friendly with a touchscreen device where you're able to pull the different manipulatives to be able to solve the problem. And you can work together as a group. All right. I know you guys are enjoying my two-step equations in math, but I am going to move on from your workspace. And I'm going to set you up in another workspace. And this would be the culmination of the different activities that the students had completed where they're actually practicing their two-step equations. Overall, I think this is definitely much more engaging than just providing the students a handout where they're actually just, repeating questions and answers. And I know a lot of times it's kind of like I call it drill and kill on the practice. So in this workspace, you'll work collaboratively. I'm going to put you down to 6 teams on this one. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start the workspace. And in this activity, what you're going to do is you're actually going to complete the maze. You'll have space on the right-hand side to show your work, and you can erase your work. And I'll give team 1 a little hint here. After they solve, nice try, team 1. Funny. I'll give you a hint, team 1. So you're going to start with your first problem, and I'm going to give you your first answer, heading you in the right path. Now you'll go on and you can solve the next problem. Let me see if I can go into any other groups and see if anybody's figured out at least the first part of the pathway. Yeah? Oh, I don't know. I know. Math is hard. But I'm sure your other 5 teammates can help you out, team 2. You're getting a good pathway though. Oh. Now I'm going to check out team 6. Team 6 has got the first 2 done. Oh, they're on the 3rd one. Good job. Got some serious math solving going on. Good job. Good job, team 4. You're getting the idea using the tools. Whoever's writing in red, good guesses. So like I said, that was the last activity they would complete that's very hands-on as a group before they start their assessment. So I've moved you on from your workspace. You now see your assessment. So your students have completed their small group activity independently, and they're now on to their assessment. You can click start as I click start. And essentially I gave them 5 sample problems. They have to solve them. You probably have access to some sort of paper for them to be able to write out the problems. I can give you a few hints over here as I go through. When the students get them correct, you drag the shields to the shields, the fire to the dragon. If they're correct, they'll go to the top. If they're incorrect, they get bounced back. And that's based upon the settings that I chose for this activity. So this would be your way of being able to check student understanding at the end of the entire lesson. So I hope I gave you guys some ideas of examples of what you can use to create some engaging, innovative, and hands-on small group learning and instruction with that, limited access to technology today. I hope it sparks some ideas that you can use before your school years start closing out, and maybe some new ideas of ways you can work in small groups at the beginning of the school year next year. To recap, the three things we definitely talked about today were about student agency and teacher guidance around groupings and how you can use the SMART solution for aiding and making your groups. We talked about how you can have teacher-led small groups using SLS Online with shared devices. And then we also talked about having student self-guided or paired rotations with interactive elements of SLS Online as well. And before we close out, I want to do one more shout it out activity. And I want to know what tool or strategy that you learned today will you add into your small group instruction? So if you just took one little nugget away from today, what was that best thing? So you're back over in my class on Hello Smart, and you can enter your response. What's that one thing you learned today that you'll take back and be able to use in your class tomorrow? Everything. Love it. Workspaces. I know, workspaces is pretty awesome. Being able to have that collaborative learning. Oh, the grouping tool. Just so you know, the grouping tool, the secondary one, is already available on the Smart Exchange. So content.smarttech.com, that grouping tool is available. That maze, just to tell you, found it online, was able to upload it in SLSO and then be able to modify it. The writing tool, I got another workspaces. I got some assessments. No, you lost your sound. Luckily, we're recording this and we'll be able to make sure that we'll send it to you in the follow-up. I love this shout it out. I know I've used shout it out a lot. I love handouts. Groups to goals, love it. Workspaces again. You can see I'm trying to keep up with you guys. Workspaces. Love the idea of station rotations. Look up Caitlin Tucker. Caitlin with a C. She's like the queen of station rotations. Tons of information about blended learning. I'm loving the new options and handouts as well. Super exciting when that came out. Like, it's amazing. Awesome. I love that you appreciate Weeze more now too, because I do as well. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go on. I have a couple more things, and then we're going to be able to end out. What I want to share with you guys today is that there is one more Ed-to-Ed webinar that is going to be happening before the end of the school year from my colleague, Akia Shepard, and it's going to be about flipping your classroom. So being able to have students use SLS Online at home and to be able to kind of further the learning that happens in the classroom.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Laura. Lots of really great information today. I know that a lot of questions were answered in the chat, but just a reminder, as Laura mentioned, if you visit the website, you not only can see our upcoming Ed-to-Ed webinars, but you also can have the opportunity to view files and recordings of all of our archived webinars from the Ed-to-Ed series. So we really encourage you, while you were there to register, kind of go back and also spread the word about all of the great resources available. Once again, we did want to remind you that we do offer the certificates for you to document the PD hours. Just once again, go to this training.smarttech.com at the end of both webinars to get that certificate. You will also receive an email early next week with the link to the recording and presentation files from today's webinars. So once again, we really appreciate you joining us today, and we're excited for you to take these resources back to your schools and your districts and your classrooms. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much again.